Welcome back, fellow returners, to Games That Could Have Been, the show where we highlight things that were cut from the final copies of Final Fantasy games. This week's matter of business is the absolutely colossal game of Final Fantasy VI, a game I've definitely covered a few different aspects of in the past, including the time I checked every single tile to find hidden treasures. Incoming card for that video right here. But this video will be a bit different, as we'll be looking at some unused content that never made it into the final game, or was altered for a different audience that we never got to see. It's interesting to note that this absolutely amazing game was made in only a year by around 20 or 30 people, and considering how much cut content there is for the game, it's clear that they covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. To kick off this unused content, we're going to start with looking at an early version of Terra that used her original concept art as the basis for her sprite. But before anything, I did want to point out that there's a lot of prototype information for this game, but it's all primarily funny typos that weren't fixed yet. Anyway, let's get started. As I mentioned earlier, Terra originally began as a blonde-haired character with no ponytail, and we all know that her name wasn't Terra in the Japanese version, but it was Tina, which, I don't know, we're all massive Bob's Burgers fans over here, so the connotations are a little... But it's interesting that this early design wasn't changed until way later in development, as this sprite sheet has a date of June 25th, 1993, around 8 or 9 months before release. Some other sprite sheets from very close to release has more or less the final versions of the characters that we all know and love, except that they all have a pose that's not seen in the final game, this floating pose. Another character that I actually used in the thumbnail is a bit of a mystery character. But before we focus on this character, take a look at Edgar. He's using some sort of dagger weapon that's not used in the final game, which he uses very few daggers anyway, so I have no clue what this could be. But anyway, back to this guy. I have no idea who this fellow could even be. The cutting room floor thinks 3 possibilities. It could be an unused version of Celeste, Setzer, or maybe it's just a joke character, meant to be a placeholder. But if I had to take a guess as to who this could be, I'm gonna guess a really early version of Shadow or Clyde. Or also, it could be any of these names. There are so many unused names in this game. Look at this Magitech armor fight. Why is Terra attacking with a weapon? Which weapon is it? It kind of looks similar to the weapon Edgar was using in one of the previous photos, but I don't know for sure. We all know now that only Magitech abilities can be used while sitting in the armor. So exactly how does this work? Or more importantly, why would you want to attack with a weapon when you've got magic beams you can throw at enemies that deal way more damage? Lastly, look at the Esper that's encased in ice in the final game. We all know this scene, and we've seen this Esper 1,000 times. However, this isn't originally what was going to be planned. As we can see here from a pre-release shot, the Esper that was going to be on ice was originally Madeline, which I think is a much better choice overall, considering the story points later on in Terra's story, and the fact that we play as Madeline later on. Alright, firstly, I'm not going to cover any specific battle formations that were cut from the final game, but there are so many of them for the hundreds of different enemies. Some of these formations are used for cutscenes, and some are used for nothing at all, as they're totally empty. I did just want to point out that there are literally 50 unused formations, but we're going to move on. We all know that there are key items that are interesting, such as the book for machinery that Cyan hides, and the fish that you can capture to either revive or kill Sid. Poor Sid. But there are 7 unused key items in the game that have 0 function at all. The first 3 all relate to the visit to the opera house, and they include an actress's autograph, nail polish, and an opera record. These 3 have no importance in the game at all, but maybe you get the autograph from Maria as some sort of thank you for filling in her role since she wasn't there, which, can we just talk about this for a second? Why wasn't she there? Do we ever even find out? I don't know. I would love to figure this one out. But the other 2, the what is it, nail polish and the opera record, I have no idea. I do want to play that opera record though. Maybe it's an unused song that turns up sometime. Other key items include a magnifying glass, a curious stone, a strange painting, and a piece of paper. The only one I can even come up with a hypothesis for is the strange painting. Maybe it was once used in some sort of quest to get Realm back in the World of Ruin, but just like anything else in this series, I don't know. The piece of paper maybe was used during the Returner's Hideout. Nice. Part where you arbitrarily put a piece of paper in the trash. I don't know. It's commonly known in the Phantom Train that there's a fairy ring that's unreachable. I mean, it was even pointed out to me in a comment left on one of my previous videos. But in the upper left corner of the same room as the fairy ring is a hidden tent. You can reach it with a walk through walls codes, but I just thought it was fascinating that there's an item that no one had ever mentioned before. Hey, lastly, do you remember Dullahan? Dullahan is the boss that you face right before you get the Falcon in the World of Ruin right after finding Setzer early on. Dullahan has 2 things things you can steal from it, an X Potion and a Genji Glove. However, neither Locke or Gogo is available during this section, making it absolutely pointless to have anything that can be stolen from this boss. Hey, speaking of Gogo, a couple of shop modifiers are used in the game, and they're when you play as Edgar and try to go into any of the shops in Figaro Castle and buy tools and items and you get a huge discount. And when you visit Thamasa for the first time and everything is outrageously expensive. But there are two other modifiers in the game that aren't being used, and one of them does indeed identify Gogo as a male. Not that that matters, but whatever. We all wanted to know. But the first modifier outright doubles all prices in whatever specific shop that it was meant to be used. I imagine this modifier would be placed in Thamasa before speaking with Strago and saving Realm from the house fire. The other modifier adjusts prices based on who the party leader was. Females get half-priced items and males get a 50% markup, and Gogo was attached to the male modifier. So there's your answer for the year-long quest to find out who Gogo even actually is, which kind of want to do a video on that anyway. I can't think of a single instance where the last one could be placed, but interestingly enough, both of these modifiers work flawlessly when implemented into the game via hacking. Nearly every Esper has some sort of level up bonus, such as HP plus 50% when a level up occurs, or various stat increases. But there are a few level up bonuses that weren't used in any capacity. And honestly, I'm wondering if these were the bonuses that were originally attached to the Espers that didn't have any bonuses to begin with, such as Phoenix and Unicorn. One of the bonuses cut from the Super Nintendo version, the HP plus 100 bonus, ended up being used in the Game Boy Advance port on the Diabolos Esper. But there are two very curious ones that need looking at: level plus 30% and level plus 50%. There are no description markers for either of these, and they have no coding attached to them. The cutting room floor doesn't even offer up any sort of explanation, but if I had to guess, I'm wondering if they boosted every stat by their respective percentage, mimicking a level up, but a more powerful level up. I have no way of knowing if that's correct or not, but it's interesting anyway. The place I get all this information from only lists one unused song. I'll play it in its entirety, only because it's important to the other games in the series, but it's also very short. Basically, in earlier Final Fantasy games, when you find an important treasure or get a key item, this fanfare plays. In Final Fantasy VI, this song was remade in order to follow suit with the earlier titles, but it was cut for unknown reasons. I managed to find a few more songs, and I'll just play a portion of each one. But we're not done there. There's a song used in Final Fantasy VI when you're in the process of saving Realm in the world of Ruin. But all the way back during the development of Final Fantasy II in 1987 and in 88, this song was cut from the final game. I think this is absolutely mind-boggling that this song was used nearly a decade later, but moving on. Alright, this content isn't exactly not safe for work or anything, but in the American version of Final Fantasy VI, there are several enemy sprites that were changed in some way in order to cover up some scandalous clothing choices, and some possible tobacco or drug use also. First up is Siren, an Esper that the party gets pretty early on in the game. Here's the differences between the American version on the left and the original Japanese sprite on the right. And the same thing happened with the Esper Starlet, or Lakshmi. Just added some cloth to cover up some parts. A unitard was added to the alluring rider, and the madam had some smoke removed from her sprite to make it look like she... well, I don't know. When I was a kid, I thought she was holding a plate, so I guess it worked. The boss Goddess had a lot covered up, as you can see here. And during the final boss, there are several censored bits, but most notably, this little lady up here had some coverings added. Just like all the videos in this series, this certainly isn't all of the unused content, but I just found these to be the most interesting ones. Real quick shout out to the cutting room floor for providing nearly all of this information. If you want to see unused content in just about any game you can think of, head over there and you can search for your favorite games. Real quick side note also, I'm not sponsored by them or anyone actually, I just think that this place is amazing. Anyway, leave a comment below and tell me what your favorite piece of unused content was. Lastly, Final Fantasy Tactics also had a lot of unused music and maps cut from the final game, and one exclusive job that belonged to a person killed in battle that we never got to see.